Hello and welcome to the NFL DFS on the RotoRadar podcast. My name is Joshua Riemer, joined by none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Jared Block. Jared, how are you doing on this fine Thursday afternoon?
Doing well, man. It's not really the reason that we're here, but both of our teams are in the NBA in-season tournament semifinal tonight, and thankfully we get to watch and discuss that in a certain aspect today instead of Patriots and Steelers, which I know everybody loves to hear that. You're not going to hear it on this show, thankfully. But man, this week's a little bit ugly in terms of a full NFL scope. Still have some really good headliner games. I think that some of the 1 p.m. games are interesting. There's some weather involved. But it basically is a run back of last week in terms of just a first look, fresh. It's not really a fresh thing just because I think you're going to see a lot of McCaffrey again. You're going to see a lot of Zach Moss again. And you're going to see a lot of some of the similar plays we saw last week. Now, the real thing is here, you have some decisions to make at quarterback that I think are going to really throw people for a loop today. We'll talk about that as we go along, but we have some guys that, I think it's been a little bit different where the top option's been very clear the last several weeks, and I think this one's a little bit different this week.
Yeah, for sure, man. Happy we don't have to talk about that Thursday night football game. Probably one of the grossest ones I can remember in recent memory. I don't know. Can you think of a worse Thursday night football game than the one that we're
We've
going to have
had
tonight?
plenty, but I don't know if this one, I think this one takes the cake. I mean, a 30-point over-under, it actually sat across the 30-point threshold at 29.5 over the last 24 hours. I don't remember an NFL game being that low. I've seen like 33 in preseason, and we've seen like around that in preseason, but in regular season, I think 33, 36. I mean, but this one really takes the cake here.
Yeah, I think I saw this on the Pat McAfee show. The last time that we had a game with a 30 over under was back in the 1960s. So it gives you some type of idea of exactly how rare this type of game is and how ugly this game could end up being. But you'll be taking coverage of it. You'll still be doing content for it like you always do. So good luck with that.
Yes.
I wish you the best of luck there. But luckily, you and I get to talk about Week 14, like you mentioned. Last week of teams being on bye, still a pretty loaded slate. We have a total of 12 games on the main slate, so still lots to talk about. If you're ready, I'm ready, man. Let's get into this thing.
Yeah, I'm either going to be really, really happy and not caring about writing up that Thursday night game, or I'm going to be really upset and even more upset that I have to write it up because the Bucks game's at 4. So that's how today's going to go.
Yeah, let's just say I'm happy that the Lakers game is at 8. Lets me steer clear of that game completely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. First game up that we are going to be talking about is going to end up being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing off against the Atlanta Falcons here. Currently, we have the spread at -2.5, favoring the Falcons, over under at 39.5. Let's start with this Tampa Bay team. It's, this Atlanta team seems like they have a pretty solid defense. It's hard to really get interested in too much here, but I guess the first thing I want to start out with is the fact that Mike Evans just continues to be an absolute wagon. You nailed this call in the preseason, just talking about him and how much you liked him, and it's been one of your better calls of the whole season. What do you think about Mike Evans, and what do you think about this passing game facing off against the Falcons this week?
Yeah, I think that I've had a lot of bad calls this year. But I think this one is my best call of the year. So getting him in the 5th, 6th round was certainly something you're not going to see. But yeah, I mean, the guy is a stud. I don't think he is a cash game play this week necessarily. You're going to get a lot of really gross environments that are in not even only in conference, but also just in division this week. So this is one of those. It's kind of a fight for the NFC South. Atlanta currently holds the 4 seed in the South, or 4 seed in the NFC, which is even worse. So I'm hoping for a Tampa Bay win here. I don't want to see Atlanta up there, but at the same time, I kind of respect this, and I don't think you need to necessarily go there. If you're going to go at anybody, though, it would be this spot for Mike Evans. Tournament play definitely off of Chalky Keenan Allen, potentially Stephon Diggs there too. The guy that fits the mold in terms of guys that actually profile well in the spot is going to be the tight end Cade Otton. We played this spot a couple weeks back when he was facing Whatever. What team was that? Facing Houston. We played it. He also played it when he was facing Atlanta. But yeah, it's just one of those spots where I know he didn't get targets last week. But I think this is a spot where you can rely upon that funnel being a thing. Nothing's going to stand out here on the Tampa Bay side. Nothing's really going to stand out too much on the other side either in Atlanta. It's kind of just one of those middling games. We're going to have a lot of those this week, but you're going to have to make decisions on playing those kinds of spots. So honestly, a 41 total is kind of up on the end of our spectrum this week.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely some solid pieces here. Definitely don't mind the K dot and stuff. I don't think you have to be overweight. I think this is the week to jump off the Rashad White train.
Yeah.
Was a really good last week for him, where continues to get a good amount of touches. Got that rushing touchdown against Carolina, but this week Atlanta's been a top 5 defense against the running back position. I'm fine with staying away from it. I don't feel like anything's a need here necessarily. Do we want to talk about the other side? Talk about this Falcons team a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about the Falcons. I think that the only play that really stands out here is going to be Drake London, and maybe that's more of a DraftKings play, but we know that Tampa is a run funnel and or a pass funnel, and they do pretty well against the run. They have done well against the run all season. I understand that the Falcons are going to rank pretty much dead last, not even pretty much, they are like far and away the team that's going to run in terms of the run pass or the run rate over expectation, not pass rate, but they're literally negative 10% on the rest of the NFL in terms of the pass rate over expectations. So I understand we're going to get a lot of gross running back situations here. You could say that Bijan's got the volume and going in the right direction there to end the season, which has worked out. They've been winning football games, but if you're going to want to target anything in this side, you're going to target Drake London, who is actually really cheap on DraftKings. You could profile as one of the better guys under 5K this week. So I like that spot, and then everything else kind of feels like it's not necessary. I guess you can make a case for Kyle Pitts as well.
Can you make a case for Bijan, man? I mean, like, this Atlanta team has not been as elite as they have been against the run. Been
Well,
ranking in the
you
bottom
say
10
that. I
over.
don't know. I think it's still something I don't really want to do.
Yeah, but I mean, even with that, they're ranking bottom 10 against the run over the past 4 weeks. This is the Bijan who's getting an elite amount of carries. Sure, he didn't do well against the Jets, but, ugly game. Jets defense is pretty strong. I feel like you're getting just like a considerable discount here at 7,100 on FanDuel.
I mean, yeah, it is definitely a discount. You also have to keep in mind that they did play the Niners in that month stretch too. So there's, McCaffrey ended up going off in that game. JT had a really good game. So I guess I understand to a certain degree. He probably is a top like 7 running back on this slate when all said and done. But there are some really, I think the running back position is pretty clear cut this week.
Okay. Anything else here that you like? If not, we can talk about Pick'em.
I will say he is I guess I mean, you'll hear it at the end of the show too, so you'll probably forget it by now if you're listening. But Bijan is a great pivot off of Isaiah Pacheco, who will undoubtedly be really high owned on FanDuel.
All right, let's talk about the Pick'em side of things. Anything you like from this Bucks team to start out on Underdog?
Yeah, I mean, we've been targeting Mike Evans fantasy points, so I usually wait until about Saturday or Friday night to put that in. I'll probably do that again, just because even if he has a somewhat below average receiving game, the touchdown equity is still there. And I've been able to really hammer that home on Underdog where it's half PPR and you really get a boost from the touchdown scoring. Other than that, I don't have much to say. I think you can play 24 and a half receiving yards for Cade Otton, but I wouldn't expect anything over 4 receptions.
For sure. I'm probably not excited about anything in this game in general, too. Not just on the Bucks side, but on the Falcons side too. I mean, there's nothing that really stands out as a must at all. Yeah. Anything on the Falcons side that you really like? I mean, you talked about Drake London
Yeah,
numbers, 47 and a half receiving yards. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I understand that last week was disgusting. They played in a bad weather game as well as an elite defense, elite secondary in the Jets. So you're going to get a complete 180 in that spot. I would say this situation is very much like Tennessee. in terms of the secondary funnel. And we saw against Tampa that he was able to go 6 for 54 off of 7 targets. Tennessee 5 for 55 off of 7 targets. It'll be a little bit of a sweat, but I think Drake London can get there. Right now, the underdog line is 47.5.
Yep. All right. Anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's move on into the next one.
We can move on.
All right, next game up is going to be the Rams facing off against the Ravens here. Ravens are 7.5-point favorites. Over under opened up at 45, now all the way down to 40. Let's talk about this Rams side first, Jared. Big time game last week against the Cleveland Browns. We saw Stafford honestly look really good, and this offense kind of cook against a very good Cleveland defense. So, what do we think about them as they face off against a fully rested Baltimore Ravens defense that has been top of the league?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of playing Rams, I understand it from some angles. Personally, as a cash game player, I'm not going to say I'm going to highlight any of them. I think that Baltimore's defense is electric and one of the best in the NFL. And Baltimore, in my opinion, still has a really, really good shot of winning the Super Bowl this year. I think that LA has shown some resurgence and they looked really good. And you could also argue that maybe Cleveland's defense from last week when they played them was in a spot where maybe they are approaching some turbulence. So I think that some of these plays for the Rams are good for DFS because they are very, everything kind of just funnels through 3 guys, right? And I think that that is something that we can use to our advantage and feel pretty good about in terms of volume. I guess we should wait to see what happens with Puka Nacua. He was limited with the shoulder. It does feel like they're in a spot where they're 6-6. There's a lot of NFL teams that are 6-6, and that's kind of good enough for at least the NFC to get into the playoffs. But it's going to be a spot where this is basically like you have to kind of just win out to try to get some things going here. So that's the Rams' only chance at this point is to win out and continue to fight through this. I personally have no interest in cash. I would understand if you wanted to play price tag situations on either site. I mean, Cooper Kupp is 7,100. It makes sense. I was going to say it makes 0 sense. It's just weird to see. It's kind of a sticker shock kind of situation. But I'm off of the Rams offense. Would I play them in tournaments? Sure. Because I think that some of these Baltimore pieces could be interesting to play for cash.
Yeah, for sure. Tough matchup for Kyron Williams. He'd really be the guy that I really want to get exposure to, but it's just hard against this Ravens team that has been very good against the run all season long. And I don't know, the Puka stuff, I think he plays. They said he was limited yesterday, but McVay came out and said afterwards that like he might have been limited, but he did everything in practice. So like I don't think
Yeah.
there's much of an issue there. I think he's just going to be fine. He's been toughing out this shoulder injury, feels like all season long. Um, but yeah, I don't think you need to, I don't think you need to be overweight here. I don't think you need to get exposure or too much exposure to anything. I just think maybe getting some of the passing attack would be good. They're going to be behind by quite a bit, in my opinion. I think Baltimore should have a commanding lead. So a stack here of Stafford and Puka or something like that wouldn't necessarily be the worst. Okay. Anything else on this side? If not, let's talk about Baltimore.
I guess we can use this as a transitionary piece here. I think that I think that there are some plays that are cash game viable for the Baltimore Ravens, but we are in a spot where it's December now. We got to pay attention to weather a little bit more. This game, at least as of Thursday, and again, I say that just because it's Thursday, there's a 95% chance of rain here with winds 15 to 18 miles an hour, gusting above 20. So while it may be warm, I know this is technically a warm front. I mean, it's going to be like 50 degrees here in Milwaukee today. So a little bit of a warm front this weekend throughout the country, but we have a lot of rain in the forecast that could have been snow. So thankfully that's not a thing, but this game has a lot of rain in it, or at least Thursday says it does.
For sure. All right, let's talk about the Ravens side and talk about Lamar coming off of a bye week, fully healthy. Sure, he's excited to get back out there, gets to get back in the MVP conversation, hopefully, as well. What do you think about Lamar? Conditions are tough from what you said, so I don't know how much you can like his passing ability, but obviously that rushing upside is always there.
This is one of the quarterbacks that I think is kind of unaffected by weather to a certain degree. Now, obviously, I think when you're playing in bad conditions, everybody gets ticked down a couple percentage points, right? But Lamar, I think, is still fine in this spot. I think he's one of the cash game considerable quarterbacks. DraftKings, I don't think you have to pay up for quarterback this week. I say that even though we do have Allen, Mahomes in the same game. Jackson, like I said, Justin Fields is relatively, I would say he's on the cheaper end actually. But you're gonna look at the mid range of QBs like we did last week on DraftKings on FanDuel. You can always find a way with softer pricing to get to a spot where you can pay up a quarterback. I do think Lamar Jackson pops on this site a little bit more. Not having Mark Andrews is always going to bother me a little bit. And I feel like he could have had a better game against the Chargers and just wasn't able to necessarily put it all together, even though they were able to win comfortably. So I don't know, man. I think he's okay. I think that you're just trying to find a quarterback that can get you 20 fantasy points. I would say Lamar is on the upper end of that, but you also look at the last several games here, and outside of a 33-point day against Detroit, that's definitely deserved. And that 23, I mean, like, yeah, he's just hasn't really been consistent in that category this year.
Yeah, I would say like you really need a team to push him to be able to really unlock that upside of what we know Lamar as a guy that can get you like 30. And I just don't think any of these teams really push him to do that, in all honesty. And I don't know if the Rams do either. So like I'm not excited about the Lamar stuff. If I got excited about anything, it'd probably be Keaton Mitchell. He's been an animal. He's really good. The upside is certainly there. You could also go Gus Bus and hope for touchdowns, but I like the GPP upside of Keaton Mitchell. I don't think you need to be overexposed here. What do you think about Isaiah Likely in this spot where, he's kind of taken over the tight end position for Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I mean, likely he's going to pop in this scenario. I think that he is a solid cash game play on both sites. You can certainly talk yourself into the conversation. He's probably a top 3, 4 play in that regard. Prices are good. I do worry a little bit about how much Baltimore will even have to pass in this game. They've shown that they can be effective either way. I think the target share was pretty solid for him. The cash game player would be Zay Flowers. I think that he is still really affordable on FanDuel specifically. This is a FanDuel specific play. He's 6,500. I think that there are a few key guys here in the mid sixes that you can pair with an elite receiver up at the top to play in this environment this week. I guess I worry a little bit about rain, sure, but I mean it's Zay Flowers' target share now. I think Mark Andrews is going to shift more so to Flowers than to Likely in that regard, even though I do expect around 4 to 5 targets for a projection for Likely there. So I think
Yeah,
that the yardage is not great. The low ADOT stuff is certainly a thing, but Zay Flowers has shown rapport all season, and I think that the volume is all we've needed. He still could burn you though. I mean, like 6,500, you're looking for double digits on FanDuel, and he just always seems to be in this world where he's getting 8 to 9 fantasy points, which I don't know if that's good enough this week.
yeah, for sure. I can agree that it's probably not good enough this week. Anything else here for this Baltimore team? If not, let's move on to pick them.
No, I think we're all set. I'll say later again. I just feel like there are a lot of pathways for this thing to really be just a Baltimore domination, where the score is not high, but they win like 24-6 or something. I think that's the way that I see this going more often than not.
I would tend to agree. All right, pick them. Rams. Anything you like here?
No, I'll stay away from the Rams. I just think that this used to be very, very predictable in a sense, and right now it is not. So I'm out on the Rams.
For sure. I can be out on the Rams as well. Ravens. Anything you like here?
Sorry, I just saw I was scrolling through and I saw a Cup at 46.5 receiving yards. I mean,
I know.
that's putrid. It's like Zay
Disrespectful.
Flowers says the same line.
Yeah.
Um, I'm probably out here. I don't think that Lamar will even be pushed to run necessarily. You could see his rushing attempts kick up a little bit, but they would rather, I think, at this point of the season, just hand the ball off to their 3 running backs for 30 attempts. So I'm probably out on everything here for the Ravens as well.
With it being a little bit more of a ugly game and less passing opportunities due to the fact that the rain's coming down, I wouldn't mind taking an over on Roquan or Patrick Queen on tackles. If they're going to run Kyron Williams 20 times, they're two of the more solid linebackers in the league. So I wouldn't mind taking a defensive prop there potentially. But I don't think anything entices me on the offensive side.
Yeah, that's definitely something we should look at more and more as the season goes along with the weather. So I'm okay with targeting those things as well.
For sure. All right. Anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's move on to the next one.
No, let's move on.
All right, next game up is going to be the Lions facing off against the Bears. Currently, the Lions are on the road and 3.5 point favorites. Over under is set at 43.5. Opened up at 46.5. So, we saw it in the last game that we talked about where total opened up at 45, ended up at 40. This one opens up at 46.5, ends up at 43.5. Is it potentially because of weather, Jared? Because I know we're in Soldier Field in Chicago and feels like probably it's a weather situation.
Yeah. So the weather here, like I said, is going to be more of a warm front. So we're not going to get nearly the cold weather that we've had the past couple weeks here. So that is good. It looks like the game time temperature is around 35 degrees. I would expect that on a Sunday morning. So that's not something that's too typical or too out of left field or anything. We're going to get some wind. It's right near the lake. So I think that this weather environment is fine. We saw this matchup a couple weeks ago where the Bears were really able. This is with the Justin Fields back in the lineup game where he was able to pretty much dominate for 3 quarters, and then the Bears defense completely collapsed and they were not able to secure the victory. Detroit ends up scoring 2 touchdowns within 5 minutes and they win the game. But now we've seen Detroit, who I think that we've just seen them really, really struggle this past four weeks. So I would say this game tends to stay closer, and Vegas obviously agrees with them being only 3 point favorites on the road. I agree that they should be favorites here. Neutral site, Detroit's a -6. Uh, but yeah, I think that one, the Lions are going to continue to struggle on defense, but number two, I think that there presents an environment here where you can expect 4 quarters for some of these weapons. Uh, I guess we'll start with the David Montgomery stuff. I know that is technically the second time, but this time is going to be in Chicago. I don't necessarily think that any Detroit Lions are 100% smash cash game plays, but Montgomery is at the forefront of that, scoring 4 rushing touchdowns in 4 straight weeks. I know he's not necessarily smashing value because nothing else is really surfacing from this with Jahmyr Gibbs taking most of the receiving game, but that at least intrigues me.
Yeah, definitely could get behind the Montgomery stuff. I think that's all I get behind from this Detroit team, though. I'm more interested in Chicago. We kind of nailed the Saints stuff last week. We liked Alvin Kamara, did extremely well. We liked Chris Olave, did extremely well. We liked Derek Carr, did really well until he got injured. I think I'm right back on this wagon of just like continue to attack Detroit down the stretch. And the numbers agree, right? Because they're the second worst team in the NFL against the QB position fantasy wise. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL against the wide receiver position, bottom 5 team in the NFL over the past 4 weeks. I think this is really easy. I think you can play Fields and I think you can play DJ Moore and feel really good about it this week.
Yeah, I like the stack. I like the opportunity of a back and forth here a little bit. The cold is not going to concern me. If it gets in the teens, that's a different story in Chicago, but this weather is not, excuse me, at the moment going to concern me whatsoever. Uh, and I guess the only concern necessarily is like, does Jared Goff perform well in the cold? And in considering his recent struggles, my confidence is waning in the Goff stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It should be interesting to see if he steps back up.
I
He
mean,
certainly had a
yeah,
decent week last week, but
yeah. I mean, he's he had 3 fumbles against Green Bay. He had 3 picks against Chicago in the spot a couple weeks ago. But he still has 4 straight weeks of 2+ passing touchdowns. So I don't want to slam on it too hard, but it's definitely seen a little bit of a regression to his earlier
yeah,
part of the season.
definitely. That Saints game was probably the best one he's pulled off
Yes.
recently, and against a tough defense too. So, let's talk about the pick'em side if we're ready to move over there.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Lions, what do you like here? There's no Monty number yet up of half a rushing touchdown. I've been hammering that number over the past couple of weeks, so I hope we get it back because 4 straight weeks he's just consistently on the goal line. They switch out Gibbs almost all the time when they get there. He's one of those running backs that's going to have some of the best touchdown equity in the league. So I'll look for that half of a rushing touchdown from Monty, but outside of that, I don't think I can get much here.
But I don't think there's really a reason to, right? I think that
No,
that's kind of just where it is, and we expect Detroit to be ahead here. I like Montgomery. I do have I don't have a receiving line. It's just half rushing touchdown, which is completely fine in my book.
love it. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get receiving touchdowns all that much, so I'm perfectly fine with just taking half a rushing touchdown. In fact, if they have it on UD, I might go ahead and take it now. Um, let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about the Bears side of things. I like everything here, man. I mean, Justin Fields, the last time he faced off against this team, had 100 yards rushing. I'm
Yep.
perfectly fine with taking 60 and a half. I really like DJ Moore this week. I think I'll wait for a fantasy line because I want those receptions included. I want the touchdown equity included for him. Um, but I really like the Fields and DJ Moore stack, like I mentioned when we were talking about the DFS side of things. So
Yeah.
both of these guys are really, really solid plays.
Yeah, obviously various levels of talent that the Detroit Lions have faced, but giving up the house against Keenan Allen, Reed and Watson smashed this Lions team on Thanksgiving. Last week, Chris Olave went bananas. So yeah, I mean, DJ Moore is in a really good spot, and the Lions have allowed. All that being said, the what fourth most fantasy points against wide receivers the last month, it all kind of adds up there.
For sure. Anything else in this game, Jared? If not, let's move on to the next one.
The last point that I wanted to make was in the same light as the DJ Moore stuff. I guess he's a little bit more expensive than I would have anticipated, but he's 6,500 on DraftKings. I think that that's still a playable spot. I know he was in the upper fives earlier this month, but I certainly can get behind that. Where is he on FanDuel? I can't find him. Is he above 7?
Sorry, who are you talking about?
Oh yeah, DJ Moore is way up at 7,700. Maybe it's just a
Uh huh.
DraftKings play.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's move on into this next game, Jared, which is going to be the Colts facing off against the Bengals. Currently, we have a spread of 1 point favoring the Colts. Over under is set at 44. Going to be some weather in this game. 67% chance of rain on a Thursday or on this Thursday. So things can change. Obviously, weather's fickle, but as of right now, 67% chance of rain, 40 degrees as well. So decently cold, decent chance of rain here. I do you watch or have you or you know who Nick Wright is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
From the is it
Uh-huh.
Undisputed on Fox or whatever
He's been
show?
on every show. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see have you seen his quarterback mountain of the week thing? That
No,
segment of the show?
I usually
Okay, so
don't
what
pay
he
attention.
so what he does, I don't watch it, but I see it on TikTok all the time. What he does is he ranks all 32 quarterbacks on a mountain, and it's like a tier system essentially. And then there's someone at the top of the mountain. He knocked down Patrick. It's always Mahomes at the top of the mountain because he's a Mahomes lover. But he knocked down Mahomes because of that poor performance this week. And guess who is at the top of the mountain?
Well, it's got to be Browning, right?
It's Jake Browning, man. I
Yeah.
mean, what a great game from him against Jacksonville, and to go in there and upset that team on their first Monday Night Football game in the past decade is insane. I know there's going to be weather, I know there's going to be rain, but what do you think about Jake Browning here in this spot against the Colts?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit uncertain if there's actually we'll have to monitor this, right? I think that right now I'm kind of approaching it as the rain's not going to be that bad. I think that the rain's definitely worse in the Ravens game and in the Jets game in a similar area of that part of the country. Whereas maybe this we were able to escape some of it. So I guess we'll wait and see on the weather part. But at the same time, I do think that you get the spot for Browning, who's now under his second or third, entering his third week as knowing he's going to be the starter. So he's taking all the reps, you're getting all the practice time in. He's coming off a great game in a spot where they upset, and you're coming into a spot where you're getting a better matchup against this Colts team, who we've known that they're going to be involved in a lot of shootouts. I think that this is a great spot. I think that this is a spot where I'm not willing to say that they're going to really fall on their face here. I know that it's not really like the only negative here is going to be the fact that they are not going to get a full week of rest in, right? I think that, coming off a Monday night game, that's certainly not the case, but I do think that Browning is in a solid spot. I was on two sides of the pass rate situation. So, number one, the Bengals are still atop the league in pass rate over expectation at 7.8%. It's still ahead of the Chiefs. It's still ahead of the Commanders, still ahead of the Vikings. So that was all well and good. It was 9.2% the minute that Joe Burrow was not able to continue his season. So it has regressed a little bit, but I still think that they will rank and not adjust to Jake Browning as a spot where they should be running the ball more. I think that they're going to continue to pass. He's shown a reliance to Jamar Chase just as much as Joe Burrow has. So I think in a small sample size, Browning is a guy that can be trusted in this matchup. And I understand that maybe defenses have a little bit more tape on him now, but I do think that this is a strong spot. And on a week where I'm not certain you have to have the ultimate elite quarterback, I'd be willing to take stabs at Browning. I don't think he's 100% a lock and load on DraftKings, where they've kind of elevated his price a little bit. But on FanDuel, 6,500 gives you the ability to play Christian McCaffrey in a dream matchup at home. It also allows you to pay up for a receiver. It potentially allows you to pay up for a second receiver and kind of do whatever you want. So I'm leaning on Jake Browning, at least as of right now on FanDuel. DraftKings, he's certainly in the QB player pool, but I don't know if it's a necessity at this point, considering the QBs around him in that area.
Yeah, for sure. I can get behind everything you said. I think, the Jake Browning stuff is solid. Don't get me wrong. I think it's kind of ridiculous to have Jamar Chase this cheap. He's
Yes,
below 8K on FanDuel.
yes.
He's at below 8K on DraftKings too at 7,600. He should be up there with the top wide receivers on the slate. So I don't know. I feel like that's the easiest part to pick apart here is the Jamar Chase stuff is really it's an easy pill to swallow considering the price tag that he's at this week. I guess I just have a tough time distinguishing between Jamar and Joe Mixon here because Mixon's in a very good spot. The upside is there. The Colts have been a bad run defense for the past 4 weeks. We saw the carries were insane in that Jacksonville game. The touches were insane, I guess. Got over 25. I got a little bit scared because if you watched that game at the beginning of the game, Chase Brown was actually out touching Joe Mixon for quite a while. And then they finally started giving the ball to Mixon a little bit. Now Mixon was still getting goal line touches and he was still the guy getting the touchdowns at the end of the day. But do you think Chase Brown presents a imminent threat to Mixon's workload?
Not until he starts getting 100 inside the 5 carries, I think. I think
Yeah.
that, especially on FanDuel, came into Monday night, Joe Mixon had 100% of the inside the 5 touches for this team, and there have been a lot, and it doesn't feel like it's really been paying off until the last couple weeks or so. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. Cincinnati is kind of seeing their season decline, so let's revisit that conversation in 2 or 3 weeks if they end up losing a couple. So I'd be willing to say that. But as of right now, entering this week, I think Joe Mixon is just fine. I don't think he necessarily grades as best as some of these other running backs here, but he certainly is in a spot where the Monday Night Football price hasn't moved because the pricing was out already. That's why Jake Browning's cheap. It's also why Jamar Chase is cheap because he went nuclear in this spot too.
Yeah.
And I think that you're playing one of these weapons to support. The only time I ever want to play a running back and a quarterback, at least in 2023, is when it's Purdy and McCaffrey together. We did that last week on DraftKings. I would not do that this week with the Bengals. Too much risk and too many things can go wrong. But I like Jamar Chase here. Like you said, he's just extremely underpriced, and that has a lot to do with Monday Night Football. Also, just the market being a little bit insecure about what Browning brought to the table. But if you're going to give me Jamar Chase back to double-digit target land, I'm all in there.
Yeah, I can certainly buy into it as well. Anything else here on this Cincinnati side? If not, let's talk about the Colts a little bit.
I think that you can make cases in tournaments, maybe not in cash, for Tanner Hudson. I know that This has been an interesting situation for the Bengals tight ends. They also have Irv Smith. They have Mitchell Wilcox. They have one more guy that I'm forgetting, or Drew Sample, maybe. Anyway, I think that they're still running 4 tight ends. Tanner Hudson has like a target per route run of 33%, which is like Jamar Chase level of things when he's on his game, but he's only running a route on like 15 to 18% of dropbacks. So when he's out there, he's getting targeted. And you've seen that with 3 straight weeks of 4 receptions and actually 5 straight weeks of 4+ receptions. He's just not getting anywhere with those things, right? No touchdowns, hardly any yardage numbers. That's not going to equate to much. So DraftKings, you can play Tanner Hudson as some pivots, but I think that that's an interesting tournament play.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's talk about this let's talk about this Colts side. I think that, obviously a very interesting game against Tennessee last week where I didn't expect them to get pushed that much, and they ended up getting pushed that much. Pittman just continues to be a freaking animal, man. I mean, 16 targets last week. That's almost like half of Minshew's passing attempts at some point. So Pittman's been an animal. This offense has been okay. I guess we can start off with like something that you mentioned at the beginning, which Zach Moss chalky again. The production certainly isn't there, at least this past week against Tennessee. But I think the thing that entices us is most likely the workload and the carries that he's getting. 19 rushing attempts, 3 targets, over 20 touches. I definitely don't mind the Moss stuff. Bengals are right behind the Colts at 25th with one of the worst rushing defenses over the past 4 weeks. So, how much of a necessity is this Zach Moss play?
Yeah, this is, we said at the beginning of the show, you're just going to recycle some of the takes from last week. This is a spot where I don't care if you failed last week. We're going to go back to the spot this week. Look, I think that the matchup is better. I think that Indy found themselves in a spot where they were not comfortable with. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, he still got like 20+ touches, but the environment for Zach Moss was a little bit iffy coming into last week with Tennessee being a solid run defense. I know they've regressed a little bit too, but most defenses do. At this point of the year, you just kind of wanted more on the ground for Zach Moss. I'm going to go back to it here. I don't see a reason to not at this point in cash. I understand the price tags have gone up a little bit, so you might get some people that are a little bit scared of the spot, but name some running backs that are a better price that have a 20+ touch workload. I can't name any.
Yeah, I can't really name anyone. I guess the tough question for me is that, like, are you going Moss or are you going Mixon? Because I don't think you can play both sides of this. And I guess Moss is the easy answer because most likely you're taking Jamar Chase and you're probably not getting Mixon and Chase into a lineup this week. Um, but I guess a way to get different is maybe go Mixon Pittman instead and kind of reverse the stack that people might end up running.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, cash is leaning towards Browning Chase stacks with Moss as the running back play. You could certainly flip that and be very, very different in tournaments. I mean, Pittman has shown pretty elite upside and might even have a safer floor than Chase over the last month sample size. I still think that they're pretty on par. But again, like I think that you probably get a teeny bit more savings going the Browning Chase Moss route.
Most likely, you definitely do. All right. Anything else here? I mean, we kind of talked about Pittman a little bit, but do we want to talk about the passing situation anymore? I mean, I think it's just a solid spot for Pittman. The workload looks really, really good right now. And yeah, I don't think there's much else there.
Yeah, I'll at least give a shout out to Gardner Minshew in tournaments. I think that he's sneakily found himself in a spot where he is at the top half of the QBs in the league, and it's hard to say that considering that 10 of them are injured, but he still has found a way to keep this team in playoff contention, and I think they're going to fight for a playoff spot. So I think that he at least deserves some kudos in rostering in tournaments where if you're talking about the QBs in this game, I mean, I know Browning has the recency bias and the pass rate expectation, etc., potentially the better weapons, but I feel just as good about the other side, right? I think that the touchdowns are gonna ebb and flow here. I understand it's not a flashy thing, but Gardner Minshew is just as in play to keep things competitive. I think this is probably has the sneakiest shootout upside of the 1 p.m. window.
Yeah, definitely does have some sneaky shootout upside. I think this is a really solid stack overall. I mean, the takeaway here is that like I'd be willing to stack this game and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else here? If not, let's move on to pick 'em.
I'm a little bit more hesitant on the secondary pieces for Indy. I thought it was at some point of the season. Michael Pittman, 1A, Josh Downs, 1B. It's clear that it's Pittman, and then it's like, I don't even think there's a number two. I think it goes, Pittman, and then a couple steps down, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, and then like the other pieces from there. I think it's, you kind of just saw Pierce come back into things and Josh Downs. Not sure if it's a rookie wall situation, but it certainly is a thing where just like Baker Mayfield trusts Mike Evans, Gardner Minshew is all over Michael Pittman with this.
All over is indeed the word. All right, let's move on to pick 'em. I'll talk about the prize pick side of things and start off with this Colts team. Pittman, 74 and a half receiving yards. Certainly don't mind it. I like Zach Moss over 68 and a half rushing yards too. I think both of these numbers can get there at the end of the day.
Yeah, I like it. I like the fact that this game is a pick 'em too. So it might be, I mean, it probably won't be come Sunday, but you kind of get a little bit of an influence of people going with their scripts up to that point. So I like Moss to bounce back here. I think he's a candidate for a rushing touchdown as well as a receiving touchdown. So that's where I would go with that. And Pittman would be the only other Colt that I would take for this team. I'm not going to play any Downs, Pierce, or Granson.
For sure. Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about the Bengals a little bit. And Jake Browning, 245 and a half pass plus rushing. I don't mind that actually. Um, I think the number I like more is just mixing over 61 and a half rushing yards. There's not many worlds where I think he gets 20 carries and doesn't get 61 and a half rushing yards or more. And I
Yeah.
feel pretty confident that he gets 20 carries here.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that hopefully that would mean that he would go over. You'd be shocked at some of the inconsistency early on in the year. But again, I think that this is a spot where they're going to lean on Mixon a little bit more. I hope that they are still as aggressive passing. I hope they don't change that just because Joe Burrow goes down, and I don't think we saw that on Monday. Maybe in some other scripts where they are out to a lead, they're a little bit more conservative on that front. Where I want to get it, like I think that rushing number is just fine, but where I want to attack Joe Mixon is 21 and a half receiving yards. We just hit this on Monday. I understand that they were more of a coming into the game, they were more of a pass centric team because they were the underdog. But I do think that this is the spot where you can keep attacking the Mixon stuff as long as Browning is the quarterback. And even before that, Joe Mixon not only has covered in what I think this is 10 quarters now of Jake Browning, but he's covered since middle of October in terms of receiving yards. Only has one game in the last 7 where he did not clear 20 receiving yards.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind it. I think all that stuff is really solid. By the way, dating all the way back to the beginning of the year, Mixon, when he's had 15 plus rushing attempts, has always hit this line. So I think it was something drastic would have to happen for him not to get 15 plus rushing attempts with how this offense is currently working with the new QB and stuff. So I like the spot, man. I think you could take pass plus rushing, or sorry, not pass plus rushing, rush plus receiving, and feel really good about that too.
Yeah, you certainly could. The thing that's kind of stopped this has always either been high lines or the fact that he just hasn't been as efficient on the ground. But I think that the spot for Mixon is solid either way. I kind of just prefer Chase at that level. So, speaking of Chase, can we talk about that because that is a little bit alarming to see as far as his market numbers.
Yeah, kind of wild to see him that low. Kind of shocking because I just expected it to be a lot higher, to be honest with you. So it's at 66 and a half on my end on the receiving yards. I'm full go on that, man. I mean, there's not many worlds where I think Jamar Chase gets under 66 and a half receiving yards, even with a different QB at the helm.
I'm hesitant because I'm trying to figure out where the market thinks that this is right. Um,
Yeah.
I understand that it's a short week with the QB that now has some film on him, looked really good, probably played over his head. I think we can kind of both agree on that. More often than not, he's not gonna hit those numbers consistently. But at the same time, this offense is one of the top pass rate teams in the league, and I'm not scared by the Colts defense. So if they want to win this game, Jamar Chase has to catch 7, 8 balls, and if he's going to do that, he's hitting that 60-yard mark. I don't think you can compare Jamar Chase's poor performances against Baltimore, who's an elite defense, and Buffalo, I guess, which is, still a tougher defense than this. I don't know. I just can't buy into the fact of why it's so low. So I guess it feels like it's a trap or they're begging you to take it, but I think you just have to lean into this if you're going to play it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think you do have to lean into it. I think you have to feel pretty good about it. So, maybe the books are right. Maybe it feels a little trappy. Is essentially what you're trying to say here. And
Sure.
I would agree. It does feel a little trappy at the end of the day, but
Yeah.
hard to ignore. 66.5, especially against the secondary, where we know the Colts secondary just isn't a good secondary at the end
It's
of the day.
not good, but the reason that the last month numbers have shifted so much is because running backs have just torched this Colts team. And so, I don't know. Mike Evans was a monster in this game just a few weeks ago. I don't really see a reason to not play a top wide receiver here.
For sure. All right. Let's move on if you are ready to into the next game.
Yeah, we're ready.
All right, next game up is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars facing off against the Cleveland Browns. Currently, with the Browns as 1-point favorites. Over under is set at 30.5. Jared, didn't think we'd be talking about 230 over under games, but here we are talking about two games that are having over under up around 30. The reason for this being, of course, that Trevor Lawrence got pretty injured with that ankle sprain. We are unsure if he's going to be good to go in this one. I think the general lean of the industry is the fact that he won't be able to go in this
Yeah.
game. And so if he isn't able to go, this team is going to have to rely on CJ Beathard. Problem with that is he is also dealing with an injury, a shoulder injury. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. So if CJ Beathard is not able to go, they then go to Nathan Rourke, who I don't know a
Nice.
lot about, which usually is not a good sign when I don't know a lot about a QB that's coming into the league. Let's talk about this Jacksonville side first. This is ugly, man. I don't think you know anything about where things are going to go. They are incredibly injured right now with the fact that Travis Etienne is dealing with stuff. They are going to lose Christian Kirk for an extended amount of time. Like,
Yeah.
terrible, terrible luck to get injured at this point in the season. But how are you handling this offense and against a very, very good Browns defense?
Uh, at this moment, the game is a scratch off on Thursday. I know that's not the analysis people want to hear. If Trevor Lawrence does wind up playing, this total jumps up probably a good 5-6 points. I still won't play it. I know an immobile Trevor Lawrence is not good. And considering where they're at in the season, I would say Jacksonville probably just says, "Hey, dude, let's take one off. We're already on a short week in general. Like they played Monday night, so why risk it?" Is my concern here. Would you rather have him go in and face this really good Cleveland defense on the road and give it a little bit, or just wait one more week and hopefully he's a little bit better? So I would say I'm fading the entire spot outside of playing the Cleveland defense, who's underpriced because of the Trevor Lawrence injury. I think you're playing the Browns on both sites, and you're fading the rest of the game as of right now.
Definitely don't blame you. Definitely solid stuff for that Cleveland defense for sure. Let's talk about the other side. Anything you like on the Brown side? I mean, Joe Flacco's slinging it, man. Looks like a young gun out there. It did not look bad in that performance against the Rams. 44 passing attempts, 250 passing yards. Now, I would say that's partially due to the fact that they were behind and, they had to kind of storm back and everything. But how about Elijah Moore, man? I mean, we kind of knew about this Jets connection coming
Yeah.
into the week and felt pretty good about it. I know you did it at the very least. And 12 targets, only 4 caught, but 83 yards is not bad. I don't mind going to Elijah Moore, especially that the fact that Cooper's going through concussion protocol right now, so maybe he doesn't end up going.
Cooper missed practice Wednesday and Thursday. He also, or today, I should say, as it is Thursday. So Cooper not practicing today either. Uh, he left the game early, and that's why Moore kind of got there. So not, I think the play was still solid in general, but it did get helped by that a little bit. Joe looked good for about 80% of his plays, and then overthrew or underthrew, I should say, one specific play that ended the game last week, and then the Rams really poured it on. After that, I think he's okay. I think as time goes along, we'll just see him as a capable quarterback in the system. I don't, at least as of right now, like if you're a Browns fan, I think you want to just keep winning. And I would say Joe Flacco is your best chance of winning at this QB position. As far as DTR goes, you probably have more talent there. It's in terms of age and upside and stuff, but you're playing Joe Flacco until something looks really bad. I don't know. I think that you can take a look at David Njoku if Cooper were to miss. I think he is a very strong price on both sites. Other than that, I mean, if Cooper misses, then Elijah Moore becomes a really good play as well. So I'm not going to say completely no to this side, but I do think that you have to wait a little bit more for injury.
The Jags are the 5th worst defense over the past month against the QB position.
Yeah,
We just saw
not
Jake
surprised.
Browning have a really good week. How I know it's really ugly to be talking about playing Joe Flacco in 2023, but how good of a play is he at 4,700 on DraftKings, where that's some elite savings there that can get you to a lot of high end pieces.
It's a tournament viable play. He just has to go for 300 yards passing, and I don't know the last time a Browns QB threw for 300 yards this season. So no. I think he's okay. Again, if you're playing any quarterback on DK, you're trying to get to 20 at this price range. I think he could do it.
Yeah,
like he was an interception away from getting there. So
for sure, definitely.
also
All right.
easily stackable, very easily stackable.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Anything else in this game? If not, let's talk about the pick'em side of things.
Why do I feel like Jacksonville could still win?
Because it's the Browns.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like the Browns defense as much as the next guy this week, but man, this is interesting. By the way, there's no pick 'em up for me, so
I was about to say I have 0 pick'em up on the board today because
yeah.
we don't know the QB situation for the Jags. We don't know the QB situation for the Browns. So until we get that news, most likely you shouldn't be expecting anything over there. All right, are we ready to move on to the next game?
Yes.
All right, Panthers facing off against the Saints here. Currently, Saints are 5.5-point favorites. Over under is set at 37.5. Let's talk about this Panthers team first to start things out. I don't know, like things looked a little bit better last week, right? Like for Young, for this offense as a whole, like I think the play calling looked a little bit better. I just think this team sucks at this point. Like I think they're really bad. I don't know if I can get involved in anything on the Carolina side.
I mean, like last week was the week, right? Coming in, coach got fired, play calling shifted, nothing mattered, didn't work out. They lose Hayden Hurst as well. He was already been out for a month, but he's going to miss some extended time, probably the rest of the year. It's not great. So you're losing depth left and right. And I just don't think that this is a spot worth talking about. There are just some teams you can cross off this slate, and Carolina is going to be one of them.
For sure. Let's talk about the Saints side. We are unsure of whether Derek Carr is going to be playing or not. Got that concussion.
Yeah.
He practiced it in a limited capacity. He's been going through stuff all year long. So, I mean, I don't know. If he gets cleared from concussion protocol, which it seems like because he was limited in practice today, there's a good chance he plays. If he ends up playing, I don't know. Alvin Kamara, like, what do you think about the Alvin Kamara spot? I will say that, like, the Panthers have got a little bit better against the run. So I don't know if I'm thrilled, but I think that it's hard to compete with the workload that Alvin Kamara is currently getting, and the touchdown equity as well has been massive.
Yeah, I mean, we were really, really high on Rashad White, Tony Pollard, Deontay Foreman, and Derrick Henry, all who have scored in the past 4 weeks against Carolina. But I don't think the yardage has necessarily been there. They've just scored on them, which again is good. But and such a high price tag, I'm not sure how much I want to rely on that. And I just think that Christian McCaffrey is the better running back play. So that kind of just takes Kamara out of the build if you were to plug in McCaffrey. You can always go two running backs to McCaffrey, Kamara up top, and you can play that in tournaments. You can play that. You can fade McCaffrey in tournaments if you want to, as long as you play a Niners guy. We'll talk about that when we get to that game. But in terms of this, this is such a gross situation overall. Again, this is one of those division games where I just have little to no interest in what's going on here. But yeah, I mean, look, last week Rashad White touchdown was one of my favorite bets of the entire week, and that hit early, but didn't necessarily mean he had a great day. He ended up getting there very late with a really good game sealing run that put him over the 18 fantasy point mark. So like he ended up getting there because of a touchdown and another really big play, and that can always happen. Derrick Henry scored 2 touchdowns, but yardage was kind of just whatever. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say like you would need Kamara to just go absolutely ballistic. And if Winston is the quarterback, this team does not take a Kamara pass first approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. He's definitely not the check down guy, Jameis Winston. Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see on the Alvin Kamara front. I think the play could be solid. I think it could be a little bit rough, but I don't know. I might not be willing to pay $9K. Like, don't you think that you'd get similar production from Joe Mixon compared to Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, I think so. I also think
And you
Pacheco's
get
in that mix.
similar, yeah, you get similar touchdown equity as well. Like, I don't know. It's I think Alvin Kamara's gotten a little bit more lucky with his touchdowns, but well, I guess not all that lucky. Like he has 6 as well. So does Joe Mixon. Mixon's played a little bit longer, but on 6 on the season, by the way, is what I'm mentioning here. Yeah. What do you think about Chuba on the other side, man? Because Saints have been awful against the running back, and as much as we might hate the Panthers, the one bright spot of this Panthers team is that Chuba looks like he can be the guy.
Yeah, I think he's a strong tournament play. Nothing that I'm jumping off of. I don't really want to play Carolina. I certainly wouldn't play him in cash. But if you wanted to go there in tournaments, there are holes that you can poke. Like the Chuba stuff is certainly a thing. Whoever starts at tight end for Carolina is a thing. The problem is we just don't know that. So the same thing goes for New Orleans. We have like the first 7 tight ends on the depth chart for both teams are injured. So you just need to find out who's playing. Jimmy Graham basically still a touchdown away from Jawan Johnson and Taysom Hill last week. We could get a spot where Taysom Hill is used more as a quarterback this week than normal. I don't know. Some plays are interesting here, but it's nothing that like cash game plays. I'm out for this game.
Don't blame you at all. Let's move on to Pick'em, Jared. Talk about the Saints team first. 95.5 rush plus receiving for Kamara. I think I'd be more inclined to take 59.5 rushing yards if I were to take anything. I will say, regardless of Carr or Jameis, I think Olave's just fine at 67.5. He's starting to get there. 3 straight weeks of covering this number and 2 straight weeks of going over 100 receiving yards. I could see it being the case again. The game has to stay somewhat close for it to happen, but I think it definitely can happen.
The Saints have found themselves in shootout stuff, even though some of these games are gross, but very close games. I would expect that to be somewhat similar here. The spread's not too crazy. The total, not great, but I think that there are worlds where I would feel much more comfortable if they just let Carr sit a week and have Jameis play. Like, despite the concussion, he also has a rib injury and a shoulder injury on his throwing shoulder. So again, like if you're the Saints, why not just let Jameis take a week here against this Carolina team?
Too easy. They can't allow it. They can't
Yeah, I know,
allow it.
right?
I feel
That's
like they've been
exactly
pushing Carr like a ridiculous amount this year. Like I
right.
feel like
I do
through
agree.
everything they've been like get out. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's the competitor in him being like
This
I
is
want to
the
get out there
second or
and
third
play.
concussion, though, right? Like he had a concussion against Green
Yeah.
Bay early in the year. Maybe it's the second one, but still, 2 concussions in a year is not good, man.
Well, this is the right. I mean, so like the injury designation for him today was concussion, rib, and right shoulder. He's been dealing with this right shoulder injury for the past 2 months now, and I don't even know when the rib injury popped up, but I'm sure it was earlier on in the year. I don't know, man. Give the guy's crumbling. Give him some time off, or I don't know. Will be interesting to see what they do with Carr this for the rest of the year. I agree
Five
with you.
turnovers in the last 3 games. Just give him some break.
Yeah, where are they in
fill in there, but he doesn't get enough targets. So it's just a gross spot, man. No reason to force it. And furthermore, Brees Hall's dealing with another leg injury. It's not even a hamstring like it was last week. It's an
opinion. But Texans side, you only have two numbers up. It's CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. What are we waiting for here? Are we waiting on Noah Brown news, or
I think
why
we're
don't we have
waiting on
more?
Noah Brown. But
Why would
do you
that
really
prevent
feel?
them from posting rushing yards, though?
Yeah, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
That's a great
Interesting
question.
stuff.
I have both running backs, Schultz, but I don't have much passing numbers here. So CJ Stroud has one of his lowest passing yard lines of the season at 222.5. So I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable about any of this stuff. They're obviously taking into consideration the tough secondary as well as some of the weather conditions. So, and we've also known that this stadium just does not play well in a passing game environment. Not
Yeah,
only the injury scares, but just in general, if this thing rains, the weather just completely takes the life out of the football.
for sure. Definitely does. Jets, I only have Garrett Wilson numbers. That's all. I don't have anything else. So if you have anything else you want to talk about, go for it.
Yeah, Wilson, 182 and a half passing yards. I know he had a bad game against Buffalo several weeks ago, but that number feels attainable, right? 182 passing yards. I think he could crack 200 here, but I don't feel great about it. Conklin, 26 and a half receiving yards. I won't play any of it. I'm just saying, those things are doable.
For sure. All right. Anything else here? If not, let's move on to the next game, Jared.
No, let's talk about a good game, please.
Yeah. Well, I think this is better than the games we've talked about, at least. Let's talk about the Vikings facing off against the Raiders here. Currently, Vikings are 3-point favorites. Over under set at 40 and a half. Ugh, a little bit gross. Don't worry. The rest of the slate's really solid. At least we have that. Um, let's talk about this Viking side first. They came out and said that Josh Dobbs is going to continue to be the starter after the bye week. We got the quote from the head coach saying that it was going to be looked at and they were going to consider other options, but looks like Josh Dobbs is going to be the guy. And best news is he gets back a big time weapon. Justin Jefferson logged a full practice and is most
Yep.
likely to return this week. What do we think about this Vikings team going up against a Raiders team that they definitely have their struggles against the passing game over the last month? They've been a bottom 10 team.
Yeah, this is a spot where the Vikings come in after a bye with a not wild card. Well, I guess it's a wild card. They're technically the fifth seed in the NFC, something like that, fifth or sixth. So as of right now, I still think that they have all the makings of a team that we should be interested in for DFS purposes. I still think Josh Dobbs is a serviceable quarterback. Remember when we talked about this? I was a little bit early to it, but week 2 or week 3 of him starting, I said I think it was the Saints game. I said this is the time where things come back down to earth. It did not then, but we've seen declines here over the past couple of weeks, obviously. Both games, I believe, in primetime as well against Denver and against Chicago. This is the spot where you've gotten a little bit more of a rest here for Dobbs. I don't believe anything about let's test our other options. You're not throwing Nick Mullins or Jaron Hall out there in a spot where you're competing for a playoff spot. So the way that Detroit's playing too, you can also make arguments that the NFC North is still way up in the air in terms of the division.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot in play here. I think that Justin Jefferson being back arguably is one of the best options to go back to, and nobody's going to do it because I think Keenan Allen's a really strong play. Devontae Adams in this game is a really strong play. Some of the options we've already talked about, Jamar Chase, and the Raiders over the last month have been worse to receivers. Not something that's necessarily stood out this season necessarily because the run defense has been bad, but it's a good environment for Minnesota. I think that both teams have leaky spots where things can get a little bit more back and forth. We know that Minnesota, at least since Dobbs has been part of this offense and continued since Kirk Cousins, they've been leaning one of the heavier pass rate teams. They currently rank fourth pass rate over expectation. So, yeah, I think that the environment's solid. I'm not going to play Dobbs and cash by any means, but I think you got to look at something here. Justin Jefferson basically cancels out half of the weapons, right? But it's a nice tournament play. Jefferson, Addison, TJ Hawkinson. Like, I think that a lot of the price tags, unfortunately, when a superstar comes back, negates a lot of things. But we can relate this to NBA. Do you want to maybe try to take a stab at that when it comes to Jefferson coming back here?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it makes everyone better. Might take away a little bit of the workload from Madison and stuff, but it goes back to NBA, MLB conversations. When you lose a superstar, it kind of hurts the whole entire offense. It doesn't just, obviously take out that player in the offense. It also makes guys get tougher looks at the end of the day. Like Addison's been having to deal with top cornerback coverage for the last however long Jefferson's been out. It allows Hawkinson to get a little bit more safety coverage as well because the safety doesn't have to hang out over the top to help with Jefferson coverages. It hurts the whole team when a guy like Justin Jefferson is out, especially with how dynamic he is and how many defenders you have to commit to his level of play. So I think Jefferson improves everyone. I know a lot of people will be like, oh, let's jump off the Addison train, let's jump off the TJ train, and sure, those guys are going to take a little bit of a tick down, but what they take down a tick in volume, they will increase in terms of efficiency and in terms of efficiency. So I don't know. I think everyone can get there in this offense. I think they've shown the ability to uh, at least have two weapons that are sustainable in this offense in a good game.
Yeah, I think Dobbs can actually support more than one weapon. It's just going to be, can he support more than that? Where I think maybe TJ kind of falls off a little bit. Addison could do the same. I mean, Osborne's kind of just relegated to three wide receiver sets now. Brandon Powell out of the mix. And you kind of get a spot where the running backs, actually could improve their outcome, considering that could end up getting more drives closer to the red zone. The last several weeks, I kind of want to take the Jets game out of this, but it should at least be included. The wide receiver one, well, I say that Garrett Wilson almost topped 100 yards in this matchup a couple weeks ago, but the wide receiver one has really, really dominated in this matchup. We just saw Rashee Rice go for 101 out of 8 catches. We saw Tyreek Hill go for 10 from 150 in this matchup 2 weeks ago. We saw Garrett Wilson, like I said, almost top 100 yards. They played the Raiders 4 weeks ago, and they scored, or the Giants, and they scored 6 points, so that doesn't count. The Lions 5 weeks ago, the Raiders gave up a huge game to Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 for 108. So they're giving up massive games to wide receiver ones, and I think FanDuel and DraftKings did their job. They priced Jefferson to where he was at the beginning of the year. You could also say maybe he's a little bit discounted on DraftKings at 8,500, but FanDuel, you can't get there in cash. But I think he's a great play. He came back specifically for this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. I could definitely get behind that. Anything else that we like on this side?
No. I think that this is a really, really good week to play Justin Jefferson in tournaments.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Field might be underweight on him because of him coming back from the injury and stuff, but I can certainly get behind it. Let's go to the other side. Let's talk about Las Vegas a little bit. What do you like here from this Raiders team?
I like two pieces, and that's the two pieces that you should normally like. I think Josh Jacobs has a really, really strong touch workload, and it's just going to be a case of whether or not he gets in the end zone because he turns middling double-digit fantasy performances into 20 burgers. So if he's going to be in a spot where this game goes back and forth, I certainly can get involved in some Jacobs love. But the guy that needs to be targeted here is Devontae Adams. I understand that, again, this week and feel pretty good about that. Seattle's just been a major, major run funnel. And so if it's not McCaffrey, it's going to run in. It's going to be Debo.
Yeah, for sure. I can get behind it.
The last thing I'll say here is Eckler's not a dumb guy. I think that this could be
Yeah.
not. I shouldn't say he's. That has nothing to do with the take. But I'm saying, don't you think that would be lighting a fire under him a little bit more? I could just see Eckler just saying "f you" to everybody and scoring 2 touchdowns here.
Yeah, I could certainly see it happening. I definitely don't mind the take there. I think that more than likely he could get going here because of all this and have a really, really good game. So something to keep an eye on at the very least. All right. Anything else here, Jared? If not, pick 'em stuff.
Yeah, let's go to pick 'em. I don't think much is going to stand out here. I'll gladly fade a lot of Denver stuff except for one thing. I think Wilson 216 and a half passing yards is too small of a number against this Chargers defense.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Pick 'em stuff. Let's start off on this Broncos side. I don't mind Russell Wilson over 26 and a half rushing yards. I think he can get there against this team. I don't mind Cortland Sutton over 56 and a half receiving yards. I think that's really solid. What else do you like here?
Nothing, just like I said, 216 and a half passing yards for Wilson.
Yeah. On the Chargers side, anything you like over there?
Uh, yeah, I believe it or not, I know that. So I'm not going Keenan Allen's direction with this. I could go and get Jared Everett for 30 and a half receiving yards. That's interesting. The number where I think I'm actually sort of enticed is the Eckler rushing touchdown. I know we've bet it like 3 weeks in a row, but now it's a scorcher on Underdog. So if you're giving me that kind of spot, despite news, which makes it even more enticing, Eckler rushing touchdown feels just fine at 1.25x.
Ruined the top five for the Opto last week, so I'm off of it. But I know it's definitely a solid spot, especially as a
This is
scorcher.
like it's the classic case of things failing several weeks in a row, and then he's just fine.
Yeah, no, you're certainly right. All right. Anything else here? If not, let's move on into the next game, Jared.
Yeah, I should at least mention that Underdog just posted that Trevor Lawrence was seen participating in practice today.
Okay, good to know. That's definitely would make things more interesting in that game. All right, last game and probably the best game of the slate. It is going to be the Buffalo Bills facing off against Kansas City Chiefs. Currently, Chiefs are 1.5 point favorites. Over under set at 48.5. Let's talk about this Buffalo Bills team first. I don't think there could have been a better situation than to place the Eagles in that game. Sadly, lose, but put up a really good performance, and then get the bye week, and now you head into a Kansas City team that looked abysmal. I mean, they
Yeah.
they just looked downright awful against Green Bay, and props to your Packers because they obviously did their thing and they got a big win there. That was huge for them, but also just like man, I think if Jordan Love can throw like that on Kansas City, then I think Josh Allen should have a lot of success here. And we've seen him have a lot of success against Kansas City in the past. So, what do you think about Allen? If you're paying up this week, is he your top QB?
I still think that it probably leans towards Lamar, but it's not fair. It's not a fair comparison because they're $1,000 apart. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that Allen, where things may be closer on DraftKings, may grade out as a better play with everything that he's doing. Like he obviously had a phenomenal game against an Eagles defense that is not great against mobile quarterbacks. So this Kansas City, I think that as much as that is a winner go home environment for the last game we talked about, if the Bills lose this game, they also find themselves at 6-7 and probably out of playoff contention. So they're fighting for a wild card spot at best because Miami holds the number 1 seed and most likely takes the AFC East. There's a real good chance that this is a leave it all on the line situation. And for the Bills, it's been more of the same, right? Like you are in a win or go home environment against the Chiefs in Kansas City. I feel like that's probably something that's happened 3 times in the last 3 years or something like that. So uh, I think Josh Allen is just fine. He's probably guaranteed for a turnover or two because he's thrown an interception in 8 games straight. So
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily take away the upside of the play. I'm just saying that there are, I guess, some red flags with this. Uh, the weather here I'm looking at it right now, shouldn't be a factor at this moment. We both know from experience that while there may be wins, it affects more of the fan base than it does the field. So if you're looking at it and you see high winds, which right now it's not projecting, it's projecting 40 degrees, no rain, 10-mile-an-hour winds. I think that that's a really strong environment. It's a tough place to play, but you got to leave it all out on the line. And if you think Allen is going to do that, then I think that there are worlds where 40 plus pass attempts is in play. 8 to 9 rushing attempts are in play, and you get really, really good touchdown equity. So, yeah, he's probably the best tournament quarterback of the slate.
Yeah, I could certainly get behind that. I think the most stackable quarterback as well. Like, it's really easy just to put him with Diggs and Gabe and call it a day, right? And especially in these high octane games, Gabe is just he's usually going to have a really good day. So I like this spot a lot. I think he should be getting some Buffalo. How cash game viable is Buffalo though? I guess are we considering a Diggs? Are we considering I think Dawson Knox is expected to be back this week, so maybe off of the Kincaid stuff finally. But what else do we like from Buffalo?
I mean, this not to just reminisce, but I always have a soft spot for this game because it was the Gabe Davis 4-touchdown game where we
Dude,
had him
the most in
the most
sorry,
insane
go
game
ahead.
ever. Yeah, probably the
Yeah,
best regular season game or playoff game ever.
yeah.
It's hard to always live up to those expectations. So
Mhm.
let's get that out there first. But Kansas City is definitely taking a step back, and something that maybe people don't talk about early on in the week. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more of it as we go on, but they lost 3 starters